I never thought I'd see my mother faint. Or my father's face drain of all color like someone had pulled a plug. But that's exactly what happened when my grandfather's lawyer read his will. One minute, they were snickering about the nobody in the corner, me. The next, they discovered I'd inherited everything. For $187 million, the family business, the estate, all of it. Their perfectly manufactured world shattered in seconds. But to understand why my grandfather made this choice, you need to know how they treated me for 28 years. Before I dive into this wild family drama, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside by family, you'll definitely want to stick around for this story. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real talk and life-changing moments. Trust me, the look on my parents' faces when they realized I owned everything was worth every second of being the family disappointment. My name is Miranda Hayes, and for 28 years, I've been the disappointment of the prestigious Parker Hayes family. While my life as an art teacher in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Boston might seem perfectly normal to most people, to my family, it was evidence of my failure. I still remember my 12th birthday when my mother Lauren sighed heavily while looking at my paint-stained hands. "Miranda, darling, when will you grow out of this artistic phase? Your sister Vanessa was already planning her business career at your age." The comparison stung, but I'd grown used to it by then. Vanessa, for years my senior, was the golden child, Harvard Business School graduate, perfect posture, perfect husband, perfect life trajectory to take over the family business. Then there was Tyler, my younger brother by 2 years, who somehow managed to skip over me in the family hierarchy. Tyler has the Parker business sense, my father Garrett would beam, completely ignoring the fact that my brother had crashed 3 luxury cars before turning 21. But he could talk stocks and bonds, and apparently, that's all that mattered. The only person who ever saw me, really saw me, was my grandfather Theodore Teddy Parker. While the rest of the family attended charity galas and yacht parties, Grandpa Teddy would sometimes slip away to visit my small art studio. "Show me what you're working on, Mira," he'd say, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. 3 months before he passed, we had our last conversation in that studio. I was working on a landscape of the Massachusetts coastline when he stopped by unannounced. "There's something special about how you see the world," he said, studying my canvas with genuine interest. "The others see dollar signs and status. You see beauty and truth." I brushed off the compliment, uncomfortable as always with praise. That lot of good that does in the Parker Hayes dynasty. Grandpa Teddy's eyes took on that mysterious twinkle they sometimes had. "Don't be so sure, Mira. Value isn't always measured in stock portfolios." If I had known those would be among his last words to me, I might have pressed him on what he meant. Instead, I just offered him tea and we talked about an upcoming exhibition I was participating in, an exhibition my parents would later be too busy to attend. Christmas gatherings at the family estate in Greenwich were particularly painful. I'd arrive with my modest gifts, usually something I'd created myself, and watch as they were set aside in favor of the expensive watches, designer handbags, and exotic vacation packages my siblings exchanged. One Christmas, I overheard my mother telling my Aunt Heather, "Miranda's just different. We've tried everything, but she insists on this artistic lifestyle." The way she said artistic made it sound like a communicable disease. Despite everything, I'd made peace with being the family outsider. I had built a life that fulfilled me, teaching art to enthusiastic children, creating my own work in my free time, and maintaining a small but loyal circle of friends who valued me for who I actually was. I didn't need the Parker Hayes approval to be happy. Or at least that's what I told myself on the rainy Tuesday afternoon when I received the call about Grandpa Teddy's passing. I was alone in my studio, working on a commission piece, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. "Miranda." Her voice was clipped, formal. "Your grandfather passed away this morning. The funeral is on Friday. Do try to wear something appropriate." And just like that, she hung up. No, how are you feeling? No acknowledgement that I might be devastated by the loss of the only family member who ever truly supported me. I set down my paintbrush and stared at the half-finished canvas before me, tears blurring the colors together. What I didn't know then was that Grandpa Teddy had set in motion events that would turn the entire Parker Hayes hierarchy on its head, with me at the center of the storm. 2 weeks after Grandpa Teddy's funeral, where I stood in the back row while my siblings delivered perfectly polished eulogies they hadn't written themselves, I received a formal letter on heavy cream stationery. The return address read Preston and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Dear Ms. Hayes, it began. Your presence is requested at the reading of the last will and testament of Theodore James Parker to take place at Parker Estate on Friday, June 12th at 2 p.m. Your attendance is of particular importance. I read the letter 3 times, trying to understand why my presence would be of particular importance. Before I could puzzle it out, my phone rang. My mother. I see you've received the letter about the will reading, she said without preamble. You need to attend, of course, but it's just a formality. Preston insists on having all family members present, regardless of relevance. The pause before relevance spoke volumes. I was planning to come, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Wear the navy dress I bought you for Vanessa's engagement party. At least it looks somewhat professional. She hung up before I could respond, a typical Lauren Hayes power move. As I set the phone down, memories of Grandpa Teddy flooded back, not the formal family gatherings, but the private moments we'd shared that no one else knew about. Like my high school art show junior year. I'd been awarded first place for a mixed media piece exploring wealth inequality, a theme that would have mortified my parents had they bothered to attend. But as I stood nervously by my artwork, a familiar voice spoke behind me. It's provocative, Mira. Makes people uncomfortable in all the right ways. I spun around to find Grandpa Teddy studying my piece, hands clasped behind his back. Grandpa. I didn't think anyone from the family was coming. And miss my granddaughter's triumph? Not a chance. He squeezed my shoulder. The others are missing out. Their loss. Then there was my 21st birthday. While my parents had thrown lavish parties for both Vanessa and Tyler, mine was acknowledged with a gift card and a perfunctory phone call. But Grandpa Teddy took me to dinner at a quiet, elegant restaurant in Boston. 21 years, he mused, sipping his scotch. You know what I've learned in my 78 years, Mira? True wealth isn't what's in your bank account. It's knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. I'd nodded, not fully understanding the weight of his words then. And just last year, when I had my first small exhibition at a local gallery, I'd looked up from speaking with a potential buyer to see Grandpa Teddy examining each piece methodically, despite the pain I knew his arthritis was causing him. My parents had claimed to be too busy with the company merger to attend. These memories were interrupted by a sudden influx of calls and texts from family members who hadn't voluntarily spoken to me in years. Aunt Heather, my mother's sister, called to catch up in a transparently fake display of affection. Cousins Gregory and Cassandra both sent eerily similar messages asking if I was attending the will reading and offering to help me understand anything I might find confusing. Their sudden interest was suspicious, but I tried not to read too much into it. Perhaps Grandpa Teddy's death had made them reflect on family connections. Even as I thought it, I knew better. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to my turbulent emotions. I stood before my closet, bypassing the navy dress my mother had commanded me to wear. Instead, I chose a simple black sheath dress with a colorful hand-painted silk scarf I'd made myself. Small rebellion, perhaps, but it felt important to present myself authentically. The 3-hour drive to Greenwich gave me too much time to think. I remembered holiday dinners where I'd been seated at the far end of the table, business discussions that deliberately excluded me, and the constant, grinding message that I wasn't enough, wasn't smart enough, ambitious enough, Parker enough. The Parker estate loomed ahead, a sprawling Georgian-style mansion set among meticulously landscaped gardens. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noted the collection of luxury vehicles already parked. Vanessa's Bentley, Tyler's Maserati, my parents' matching Mercedes, Aunt Heather's Range Rover. My modest Honda looked decidedly out of place, much like its owner. The moment I entered the grand foyer, the whispers began. Relatives clustered in small groups, conversations pausing as they noticed me. My cousin Cassandra's husband Julian actually did a double take, as though surprised I'd been invited. "Miranda." My father's voice cut through the murmurs. Garrett Hayes stood tall and imposing in his bespoke suit, silver hair perfectly coiffed. "I'm surprised you bothered to come. This is mainly for the active members of the family business." I met his gaze steadily. The letter said my presence was particularly important. He scoffed. "A standard legal phrase. Preston is nothing if not thorough." With that dismissal, he turned away to join a conversation with Tyler and Kenneth, Vanessa's investment banker husband. I stood alone in the entrance hall, the outsider as always. What I didn't know was how dramatically my position in the family was about to change. The Parker Estates library was a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with wall-to-wall bookshelves and a massive stone fireplace. Leather-bound volumes lined the walls, many for show, I suspected, since I'd rarely seen any family member actually reading. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Family members filed in, automatically arranging themselves in what I recognized as their perceived order of importance. My parents took the large leather chairs directly facing the ornate desk where Philip Preston would conduct the reading. Vanessa and Kenneth claimed the plush love seat to the right, while Tyler and his wife Jenna, a social media influencer with more followers than substance, settled into armchairs nearby. Vanessa looked immaculate, as always in a designer suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. As I entered, her eyes flicked over me, registering my modest dress and hand-painted scarf. "Oh, Miranda," she said, voice dripping with false concern. "You could have called if you needed help finding something appropriate to wear. I have several designer pieces I've only worn once." Before I could respond, Tyler cut in. "Let it go, Van. Not everyone prioritizes appearances." Then, without acknowledging me directly, he returned to his whispered conversation with Jenna, who was surreptitiously filming herself on her phone for what I assumed would be a tasteless, while-reading social media post. The extended family filled in the remaining seating, Aunt Heather and her third husband Richard, cousins Gregory and Cassandra with their respective spouses, a few distant relatives who appeared at family events just often enough to maintain their standing. I found myself directed to a straight-backed chair in the far corner, partially hidden behind a potted fern. Fitting. Precisely at 2:00 p.m., Philip Preston entered. He was a dignified man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and the measured movements of someone who chose his actions carefully. He'd been the Parker family attorney for decades, though I'd only met him a handful of times. "Good afternoon," he began, arranging papers on the desk. "We are gathered today to execute the last will and testament of Theodore James Parker. Before I begin, I want to express my personal condolences to the family. Teddy was not only my client, but a dear friend." A murmur of appropriate responses rippled through the room. I noticed my mother dabbing at completely dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Preston began with formalities, then moved to the initial bequests. To Lauren Hayes, my mother, went the family jewelry collection, including pieces dating back to the 1850s. My father received Grandpa Teddy's vintage car collection, 17 vehicles worth millions. Vanessa and Kenneth were given the vacation property in the Hamptons, while Tyler received ownership of a smaller, but still valuable investment property in Aspen. Various extended family members received modest financial gifts, $50,000 here, $100,000 there. Small change in Parker terms, but enough to keep the distant relatives feeling valued. As each bequest was announced, I noticed a pattern forming. The recipients would nod graciously, but their eyes remained tense, calculating. The major assets, the primary estate where we now sat, the family business Parker Industries, and the substantial investment portfolio remained unmentioned. The tension in the room grew palpable. My mother's perfectly manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm on the leather armrest. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vanessa maintained her composed facade, but I could see the tightness around her eyes. Now, regarding the primary residence, Parker Industries, and the consolidated investment portfolio, Preston continued, adjusting his glasses. The room went completely still. Even Jenna had put down her phone. Then came the moment that would play on repeat in my mind for months to come. My mother, apparently believing herself to be speaking quietly to my father, but projecting more than she realized, leaned over and whispered, "I don't know why the nobody is even here." Several relatives tittered nervously. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my expression neutral, a skill honed through years of similar jabs. I caught Preston's eye, and something in his expression made me sit up straighter. He looked directly at me with what almost seemed like anticipation. As the whispers subsided, Preston cleared his throat and prepared to continue. "The remainder of the estate," Preston announced, his voice taking on a formal tone, including Parker Manor, controlling interest in Parker Industries, and the primary investment portfolio valued at approximately $487 million. I hereby bequeath to my granddaughter, Miranda Hayes. The silence that followed was absolute, as if every molecule of air had been sucked from the room. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. Then chaos erupted. My mother's face drained of color so rapidly I thought she might be having a stroke. Her hand clutched at her throat before she literally collapsed back into her chair. The carefully crafted Lauren Hayes' composure shattered completely. My father stood up so violently his chair toppled backward. "This is preposterous," he shouted, face flushing dark red. "There's been a mistake. A clerical error." Vanessa sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound, like a designer-clad fish out of water. Kenneth, always quick to calculate financial implications, was already pulling out his phone, presumably to call his lawyer. Tyler's reaction was the most physically dramatic. He jumped to his feet, knocking over a priceless antique vase in the process. The crash barely registered amid the growing cacophony of voices. "This can't be legal. She knows nothing about business." Teddy wasn't in his right mind. The accusations flew from all corners of the room. Through it all, I sat perfectly still, feeling strangely detached, as if watching the scene unfold in a movie rather than living it. Preston raised his hands for silence, and when that failed, he used a small brass bell from the desk to cut through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. There's more." Gradually, the room quieted, though the tension remained electric. Theodore anticipated your reaction and prepared accordingly. He recorded a video message to be played at this time. Preston turned to a laptop on the desk and pressed a key. The large television screen on the wall flickered to life, and suddenly there was Grandpa Teddy. He looked tired, but completely lucid, seated in this very library. My throat tightened at the sight of him. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I've moved on, and Philip has just informed you of my decision regarding my estate." I imagine the room is in something of an uproar. His eyes twinkled with that familiar mischief. "Before you begin contacting your attorneys, allow me to explain." He shifted in his seat, leaning forward. "For the past 15 years, I have been conducting an ongoing evaluation of each member of this family. Not of your business acumen or your social connections, but of your character. Your humanity." The tests were simple but revealing. Grandpa Teddy detailed examples that made the room grow uncomfortably still. How my father had fired a longtime employee who needed medical benefits for his sick child. How my mother had refused to help Grandpa's former secretary of 30 years when she fell on hard times. How Vanessa had deliberately sabotaged a colleague to secure a promotion. How Tyler had been caught using company resources for personal gain. Each of you demonstrated, time and again, that you value things over people. Status over compassion. Appearance over substance. His voice grew sad. Each of you failed the tests I set before you. Not business tests, but human ones. Then his expression softened. Except Miranda. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My Mira, who used her modest teacher's salary to help a student's family avoid eviction. Who visits elderly neighbors every Sunday. Who creates beauty instead of hoarding wealth. Who has never, not once, asked me for money or advantages, despite being systematically excluded from family opportunities. Tears blurred my vision as Grandpa Teddy continued. Miranda doesn't just know the value of $1, she knows the value of a human being. That is the leader I want for the Parker legacy. He leaned back in his chair. I've left detailed records of my observations over the years. Philip has copies of everything. Should any of you contest this will, those records, including some rather unflattering business practices I've documented, will become part of the public record. The video ended with Grandpa Teddy looking directly into the camera. Miranda, my dear girl, I've left you a personal letter. The rest of you, I hope this serves as a wake-up call. It's not too late to become the people I always hoped you would be. The screen went dark, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Preston broke the spell by approaching me with an envelope. This is for you, from Theodore. As I reached for it with trembling hands, Vanessa suddenly found her voice. You manipulated him. She shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at me. You scheming little nobody. All these years pretending to be so pure and noble, it was all an act to get your hands on his money. And just like that, the tenuous control in the room snapped completely. The library descended into absolute chaos. Multiple family members were shouting simultaneously, creating a wall of noise that made individual accusations hard to distinguish. My father had moved to stand directly in front of Preston, his face inches from the attorneys. Fix this mistake immediately, he demanded, jabbing a finger into Preston's chest. Theodore was clearly not of sound mind. We'll have medical experts testify. I assure you, Mr. Hayes, Preston replied calmly. Theodore underwent comprehensive cognitive assessments prior to finalizing this will. The documentation is impeccable. My mother had recovered from her initial shock and was now advancing toward me, her perfectly highlighted hair slightly askew, a small but telling sign of her internal disarray. What did you do? She hissed. What kind of trickery did you use on a vulnerable old man? Your own grandfather. Before I could respond, Tyler stepped between us, his handsome face contorted with anger. I'm calling our lawyers right now. You'll be tied up in court for years. You'll never see a penny of this money, you pathetic. I strongly advise against that course of action, Preston interrupted, raising his voice to be heard above the din. There are additional stipulations I haven't yet read. The room gradually quieted, everyone too concerned about their financial interests to risk missing crucial information. Preston adjusted his glasses and continued reading. Any contest of this will by any named beneficiary will result in that person's complete disinheritance. Furthermore, Miranda Hayes has immediate and irrevocable control of all assets as of the reading of this document. He paused to let that sink in, then delivered the final blow. Family members currently residing in or utilizing any Parker-owned properties must vacate within 30 days unless Miss Hayes explicitly permits otherwise. The implications hit like a tidal wave. My parents' primary residence, this very estate, was technically a Parker property. So was Vanessa's Manhattan penthouse, Tyler's office at Parker Industries, the vacation homes, the company cars. This is outrageous, my Aunt Heather exclaimed. You can't possibly expect us to. I never asked for this, I said, finding my voice at last. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. I had no idea what Grandpa Teddy was planning. This is as much a shock to me as it is to all of you. Oh, please, Heather scoffed. You've obviously been planning this for years. The dutiful granddaughter act. The modest lifestyle to gain his sympathy. It was all calculated. Gregory, always quick to sense which way the wind was blowing, sidled up to me with a sudden fraternal smile. Cousin Miranda, perhaps we could speak privately? I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone. Preston intervened, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Miss Hayes will need time to review all documents and consider her position. I suggest we adjourn for today. He began guiding me toward a private study adjacent to the library, but my parents followed, unwilling to let their golden ticket out of their sight. After everything we've done for you, my mother cried, her carefully maintained composure crumbling further. Done for me? I repeated incredulously. What exactly have you done for me except make me feel worthless my entire life? You cannot possibly manage this responsibility, my father insisted, his business voice slipping into place. You have no experience, no training, no. Actually, Preston interjected, Theodore has been preparing Miranda for this role for quite some time. All three of us stared at him. The art history trips abroad? The gallery openings? Theodore used those occasions to introduce Miranda to key business contacts and evaluate her natural aptitude. He also enrolled her in discreet business education programs under an alias, which she completed with distinction. I blinked in shock. Those weekend workshops Grandpa Teddy had recommended to help with the business side of your art career had actually been high-level management training. She's been receiving tailored business education for 5 years, Preston continued. Theodore was quite thorough in his planning. The look of stunned betrayal on my parents' faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. As it was, I felt only a profound exhaustion. I need to go, I said quietly. Preston nodded. Take Theodore's letter. Review it in private. We'll speak tomorrow about next steps. Somehow I made it past the remaining family members, their accusations and pleas following me down the hallway like persistent ghosts. I clutched Grandpa Teddy's letter to my chest, protecting it from grabbing hands and prying eyes. Outside, the summer air felt thick and unbreathable. I collapsed into the driver's seat of my Honda, hands shaking so badly I couldn't insert the key into the ignition. Through the windshield, I could see figures gesticulating wildly through the windows of the mansion, my mansion now, apparently. I stared down at the envelope in my lap, my name written in Grandpa Teddy's distinctive handwriting. Whatever explanation lay within, I wasn't ready to face it yet. Not here, with the weight of the Parker estate looming over me like a thundercloud. I finally managed to start the car and drive away, leaving behind a family in disarray and a fortune I'd never wanted. 1 week after the will reading, my modest apartment had become command central for what felt like psychological warfare. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members employing every manipulation tactic imaginable. My mother had left 17 voicemails, each one a masterclass in emotional blackmail. Miranda, darling, her latest message began, her voice tremulous with calculated vulnerability. Family must stand together in times of crisis. Your grandfather obviously meant for you to share this burden with those who understand the Parker legacy. The message ended with artful sniffling. My father preferred email, his messages oscillating between thinly veiled threats and condescending offers of guidance. His most recent, the board meeting on Tuesday will determine Q3 strategy. Your absence will be interpreted as abdication of responsibility. I can attend as your proxy to prevent irreparable damage to the company. Vanessa's approach was perhaps the most transparent. After her initial outburst, she'd pivoted to saccharine sisterly concern. Mira, I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for you, she texted. Let me help shoulder some of this burden. I can take over the investment portfolio management while you find your footing. Tyler, true to form, couldn't maintain a consistent strategy. His messages alternated between threatening legal action and attempting to establish brotherly camaraderie. Remember how I let you win at Monopoly when we were kids? Good times. Speaking of property management, let's discuss the Aspen situation. I'd barely slept, barely eaten. The letter from Grandpa Teddy remained unopened on my kitchen table, simultaneously a beacon and a burden. I wasn't ready to read his final words to me, not when I was still processing the earthquake he'd set off in my life. On the 8th day, I finally broke the seal. My dearest Mira, it began in Grandpa Teddy's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, then Preston has executed my wishes, and you're likely feeling ambushed, overwhelmed, and perhaps even angry with me. You have every right to those feelings. The burden I've placed on your shoulders is enormous, and I did so without your knowledge or consent. For that, I apologize. But I did not choose you on a whim or out of spite toward the others. I've been watching all of you for years, testing, evaluating, hoping I was wrong about what the wealth and status had done to our family. I wasn't wrong, sadly. The others failed every test of character I set before them. Not business tests. Anyone can learn business. They failed human tests. Compassion tests. Integrity tests. You, my dear girl, passed every one without even knowing you were being tested. You have something that cannot be taught or bought, a moral compass that never wavers, even when the path is difficult. I've left you my personal journal in the wall safe behind the portrait in my study. The combination is your birthday. That journal details everything, every test, every failure, every observation that led to my decision. I know you never wanted this role, but sometimes the best leaders are those who don't seek power. Parker Industries employs thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on ethical leadership. The foundation supports causes that change lives. This legacy can do tremendous good in the right hands, your hands. I've arranged for Philip to guide you, and I've identified several trusted advisors who can help ease your transition. But ultimately, Miranda, I trust your judgment above all others. All my love, always. Grandpa Teddy. P.S. Remember what I told you on your 21st birthday? True wealth isn't what's in your bank account. It's knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. Never apologize for who you are, Mira. Not to any of them. I set the letter down, tears streaming down my face. Later that day, I called Preston and arranged to visit the estate, my estate, to retrieve Grandpa Teddy's journal. The leather-bound volume I found in the safe was thick with additional pages tucked between entries. As I began reading, patterns emerged in Grandpa Teddy's elegant handwriting. Detailed accounts of tests he had set up over the years to evaluate family members' character. My mother, Lauren, had refused to help Dorothy, Grandpa's secretary of 30 years, when Dorothy's husband needed expensive cancer treatment. I offered to connect Dorothy with resources, my mother had apparently said. But we can't set a precedent of handouts to staff. What the journal revealed, and what my mother didn't know, was that Grandpa Teddy had deliberately mentioned Dorothy's situation at a family dinner to see how Lauren would respond. My father, Garrett, had been secretly embezzling from a subsidiary company to cover gambling debts. Grandpa had known, but allowed it to continue as part of his evaluation, documenting every cent. Vanessa had sabotaged another executive's presentation, then taken credit for their ideas. Tyler had been caught on camera berating janitorial staff when he thought no one important was watching. And interspersed throughout were observations about me, small kindnesses Grandpa had witnessed, integrity shown when I thought no one was looking. Miranda gave up her seat on the train to an elderly gentleman, then helped carry his bags when they reached the station. She didn't recognize him as Harold Winters, potential Parker Industries investor. The journal was damning, comprehensive, and utterly irrefutable. As I closed the journal, my phone rang. It was Preston. Miranda, I hope I'm not interrupting, but there's a situation developing. Your family is planning legal action despite the stipulations in the will. They're claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. I felt a momentary panic rise in my chest. The enormity of what I'd inherited, Not just assets but responsibilities, conflicts, decisions affecting thousands of lives, crashed down on me. My breath came in short gasps, the room spinning slightly. Miranda? Are you all right? Preston's concerned voice anchored me. I'm having a panic attack, I managed to say between shallow breaths. That's entirely understandable. Listen to me. Breathe slowly. You're not alone in this. After I calmed down, Preston continued, I suggest we arrange a family meeting. On your terms, on your territory. It's time to establish boundaries. After hanging up, I called the one person outside the family I trusted implicitly, my childhood friend Olivia Carter. We'd met in 3rd grade when I was the new girl at school, and she'd shared her lunch with me. Unlike many friendships that faded with time and circumstance, ours had endured. Holy shit, Mira, she said when I finished explaining everything. That's cinematic. I don't know if I can do this, Liv. I'm an art teacher, not a CO. Bullshit, she replied with typical Olivia directness. You've been managing a classroom of 30 kids with minimal resources and maximal results for years. You're organized, intuitive, and you don't take crap from anyone, except your family, and that's about to change. Her confidence in me helped, but I still felt adrift. After we hung up, I found myself driving to the cemetery where Grandpa Teddy was buried. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds as I sat beside his grave. I wish you'd warned me, I said to the granite headstone. I wish you'd given me time to prepare. A gentle breeze rustled the flowers I'd brought. But I think I understand why you didn't. As the sun began to set, I made my decision. I would arrange a family meeting at the estate, my estate. It was time to address everything once and for all. The grand dining room of Parker Manor felt different now that I understood it was legally mine. The massive mahogany table that had intimidated me throughout childhood now served as my stage. I'd arranged the seating strategically, myself at the head where Grandpa Teddy used to sit, Preston to my immediate right, and 2 security professionals discreetly positioned by the doors. I'd spent 3 days preparing, reading Grandpa's journal from cover to cover, reviewing company documents, and consulting with Preston about the legal realities of my new position. I felt calm in a way I hadn't expected, the calm of someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The family arrived in waves, clearly having coordinated their entrances for maximum impact. My parents came first, presenting a united front in conservative, expensive attire designed to project authority. My mother's pearl necklace and father's gold cufflinks gleamed in the afternoon light, subtle reminders of generational wealth. Miranda, my father nodded stiffly. I trust you've come to your senses since our last meeting. I gestured to their seats, halfway down the table, not in their usual positions of honor. The slight widening of my mother's eyes told me the message had been received. Vanessa arrived next with Kenneth, her designer business, attire a calculated choice. She dressed for a boardroom showdown, her expression professionally pleasant, but eyes cold as winter. Tyler and Jenna entered last, Tyler making a show of humility that was transparently fake. Jenna, for once, wasn't filming, likely warned that this meeting was not for social media consumption. Once everyone was seated, an uncomfortable silence fell. They were waiting for me to speak first, to defend myself, to apologize, to offer compromises. Instead, I simply sat, making eye contact with each person at the table. The silence stretched until my father finally broke. Well? You called this meeting. What do you want? I placed my hands flat on the table. I want to address the situation directly. Grandpa Teddy left everything to me. That is a legal fact that cannot be changed. How we proceed from here is up to all of us, but primarily to me. How generous of you to acknowledge our existence, Vanessa said, voice dripping with sarcasm. I've prepared a statement, I continued, ignoring her. I'd appreciate being allowed to finish before you respond. I unfolded a piece of paper but didn't look at it. The writing had been an exercise to organize my thoughts, not a script I needed. I never asked for this inheritance. I never expected it. But Grandpa Teddy's wishes were clear, and I intend to honor them. His decision wasn't made lightly or without careful consideration. He spent years evaluating all of us, not as business assets, but as human beings. That's absurd, my father interrupted. Theodore was a businessman first and foremost. He would never. You have no idea who he really was, I said quietly. None of you do. You saw what you wanted to see, a wealthy patriarch whose success you could leverage for your own gain. I saw a man with profound integrity who was deeply disappointed in what his family had become. My father's face flushed dark red. You have no right to lecture us about family. You, who rejected everything we tried to give you. Like what, Dad? The constant reminders that I wasn't good enough? The comparisons to Vanessa and Tyler? The dismissal of my passions and talents because they couldn't be monetized to your satisfaction? Before he could respond, I opened Grandpa Teddy's journal. Shall I tell you what Grandpa really thought of this family? Would you like to hear his actual words? The threat hung in the air. My mother's face had gone pale again. That won't be necessary, Preston said smoothly. I believe what Miranda is trying to establish is that she has access to extensive documentation that would be damaging if made public during any legal proceedings. Are you threatening us? Tyler demanded. I'm stating facts, I replied. Fact 1. I have evidence of Dad's embezzlement from the Westbrook subsidiary. My father's jaw went slack. Fact 2. I have documentation of Mom's affair with Richard Blackwood during the merger negotiations. My mother made a small choke sound. Fact 3. I know about Vanessa sabotaging Emily Porter's career to get her promotion. Fact 4. I have proof of Tyler's unethical business practices, including the falsified environmental impact reports for the Arizona project. The room went deadly silent. I hadn't wanted to start this way, but their hostility had forced my hand. I don't want to use any of this information. I don't want to hurt any of you. But I will not be bullied, manipulated, or threatened out of what Grandpa Teddy entrusted to me. How long? My mother asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. How long what? How long have you been planning this with him? How long have you been gathering information against us? I laughed, a genuine, incredulous laugh. That's the part you still don't understand. I didn't plan anything. I didn't gather information. I didn't even know about most of these things until I read his journal. Grandpa Teddy observed, documented, and decided, all without my knowledge. My mother's carefully maintained facade finally cracked completely. I don't understand, she whispered, and for the first time in my life, I saw real vulnerability in her eyes. Why you? I was his daughter. His only child. Why would he do this to me? The raw pain in her voice caught me off guard. Mom, he didn't do this to hurt you. He did it to protect his legacy from what we've all become. And what exactly have we become? She challenged, tears now flowing freely. People who measure human worth by bank account balances. People who see relationships as transactions. People who've forgotten what actually matters. My mother stared at me, then did something I never expected. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob, not the theatrical tears she deployed at charity events, but ugly, body-shaking sobs. I was so jealous, she admitted between gasps. He loved you in a way he never loved me. His own daughter. And I couldn't understand why. The confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected. My father, uncomfortable with the emotional display, attempted to regain control. This is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change the practical reality. You'll run the company into the ground within a year. You have no experience, no connections, no. She has me, Preston interrupted. And the advisory board Theodore assembled. And whether you choose to accept it or not, she has qualities that cannot be taught in business school: integrity, compassion, and an unerring moral compass. She has me too, Tyler said suddenly, surprising everyone at the table. If she wants my help. All eyes turned to him. Look, I'm still pissed about all this, he clarified quickly. But I've been thinking about what Grandpa said in that video. About all the tests we failed without knowing. And he wasn't wrong about me. He looked directly at me. You're gonna need someone who knows the day-to-day operations. Someone the employees already trust. Vanessa stared at her brother in shock, then at me. Something in her expression shifted, the perfect mask cracking to reveal a glimpse of the insecure woman beneath. He was right about me too, she admitted in a small voice. About all the things I did to get ahead. I thought that's what he wanted. What would make him proud? She wiped away a tear. I've been so awful to you, Miranda. For years. Because I thought he loved you more. And it turns out I was right. He loved all of us, I said gently. He just didn't respect what some of us had become. I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time seeing the flawed, complicated people behind the perfect Parker Hayes facade. This is Grandpa Teddy's final test, I realized aloud. This meeting. How we handle this transition. Whether we can put aside ego and greed and find a way forward together. My father began to object, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. Garrett, she said softly. We never understood her. Or him. Maybe it's time we tried. 3 months after the confrontation in the dining room, I sat in Grandpa Teddy's former office at Parker Industries headquarters. The space had been transformed, the dark, heavy furniture replaced with cleaner lines, the walls now adorned with local artists' work rather than stuffy portraits of stern-faced businessmen from generations past. Sunlight streamed through windows that had previously been obscured by heavy drapes. The company itself was undergoing similar transformation. My first actions as CEO had raised eyebrows in the business community, but earned immediate loyalty from employees, implementing a company-wide living wage policy, establishing comprehensive parental leave, creating an emergency fund for staff facing unexpected hardships. The quarterly projections, Ms. Hayes, said Beatrice, my executive assistant who had previously worked with Grandpa Teddy. Thank you, B. And please, it's still just Miranda. She smiled, something she rarely did under the previous administration. The board is quite impressed with the numbers. The ethical business initiative seems to be attracting new investors rather than deterring them, as some predicted. I nodded, reviewing the documents. The Theodore Parker Foundation for the Arts had launched last month, channeling significant resources into community arts programs, scholarships for underprivileged students, and restoration projects for historical arts venues. My relationship with my family had evolved in unexpected ways. My parents and I maintained minimal contact, civil but distant. They had relocated to the Hamptons property, which I had transferred to them as a gesture of goodwill, despite Preston's reservations. Tyler had surprised everyone by becoming my most steadfast ally. After initial skepticism, he had embraced the company's new direction, particularly our environmental sustainability initiatives. He'd even broken off his engagement to Jenna after she attempted to leverage company information for social media fame. Vanessa remained the most complicated relationship. Our reconciliation was tentative, marked by occasional setbacks when old patterns resurfaced. But she was trying, attending therapy, acknowledging her past behavior, and slowly building a relationship with me based on who we actually were rather than the roles we'd been assigned. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Preston entered, carrying a large portfolio. I thought you'd want to see this immediately, he said, placing it on my desk. The art collection evaluation has been completed. There are several pieces Theodore apparently acquired anonymously over the years. I opened the portfolio and gasped. Inside were photographs of works by obscure but brilliant artists, many of whom I'd studied and admired. But what truly shocked me was the final section, paintings signed TJP Theodore James Parker. Grandpa was an artist? Preston nodded. In secret, it seems. These were found in a climate-controlled storage facility. According to the documentation, he began painting seriously in his 40s, but never showed his work publicly. I stared at the images, Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces showing remarkable talent and sensitivity. I had no idea. There's something else, Preston added, handing me a sealed envelope. This was with the paintings. Instructions to deliver it to you after you'd been in your position for exactly 3 months. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Grandpa Teddy's handwriting. Art and business are not opposites, Mira. Both require vision, patience, and the courage to create something that didn't exist before. I had to choose one path. You don't. Integration, not separation, is the future. Love, Grandpa T. Later that evening, I attended the annual Parker Foundation Gala, my first as the Foundation's director. The event had been reimagined, highlighting local artists and community arts programs rather than serving as a showcase for elite wealth. As I circulated among guests, I encountered my parents. My mother had clearly spent hours preparing her appearance, her designer gown and professional makeup a suit of armor against public scrutiny. "Miranda, darling," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "What a lovely event." "So, creative." The slight pause spoke volumes. "I've been telling everyone how proud we are of what you've accomplished." My father nodded stiffly. "The company numbers are solid." "You've surprised me, I'll admit. Though I still believe some of the traditional approaches." "Thank you both," I interrupted gently. "I appreciate your support. You're welcome to be part of this new chapter of the Parker legacy, but you need to understand, you'll never control it again." The truth hung between us, acknowledged but not contested. My mother's smile tightened slightly, but she nodded. As they moved away, I caught sight of a painting being installed in the main hall, a piece I'd been working on secretly for months. It was a portrait of Grandpa Teddy, but not the stern businessman most people remembered. My painting showed him as I had known him, eyes crinkled with laughter, hands slightly paint-stained, radiating the warmth and wisdom that had shaped my life. Beside it hung one of his own works, a landscape I'd discovered among his collection, left unfinished. I had completed it, our brushstrokes merging seamlessly, a collaboration transcending time and death. Standing before these paintings, I felt a profound sense of peace. The Parker legacy had been entrusted to me not because I was the most business-savvy or the most ambitious, but because I understood what Grandpa Teddy had learned too late in his own life, that wealth without compassion is poverty of the worst kind. I had redefined family on my own terms, created boundaries that protected my well-being, built a leadership style that honored both artistic sensitivity and business acumen. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but for the first time since that fateful reading, I felt fully capable of meeting them. What's your take on inheritance stories like mine? Have you ever been the underestimated person in your family who finally got their moment of recognition? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of family drama and sweet justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove life can sometimes be more dramatic than fiction. Share with anyone who needs a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones are watching everything. Thank you for listening to my journey from nobody to the guardian of the Parker legacy. Until next time.